nation of creed is this vocation of sonship and brotherhood. And because I believe that the Father is deeply concerned, especially for his suffering and helpless and outcast children, I come today to speak for them. And as I ponder the madness of Vietnam and search within myself for ways to understand and respond in compassion, my mind goes constantly to the people of that peninsula. I speak not now of the soldiers.
We will come back again to that speech. Dr. King laying the case against the war in Vietnam. Again, I've cast that speech as perhaps the most important foreign policy speech ever given by a non-elected official here in the United States. Lavonia Perriman is the former chair of the Michigan Democratic Black Caucus here with, of course, Attorney Bill Noakes as well. Bill, I want to lead up to you on this because there is something that Dr. King is weaving in here. We talked about it yesterday. We had Reverend Lawrence Foster from Calvary Baptist Church on, and he said he would give the clergy today a D. Basically a designation in terms of their performance since Dr. King had died. We talk about there are very few ministers here in Detroit that perhaps we see visibly as socially active and so forth. But Dr. King here talking about the reason why, in fact, he's opposed to the war in Vietnam comes out of a deep religious conviction and saying that, I guess in many ways, don't be mad at me for what I'm saying because this is a part of my ministry. And we always ask the question in Detroit, if we compare it today to what we have now, do we have those? Do we have ministers who will come out and say, I'll speak out of poverty, I'll speak out of the 17,000 families or homes that are facing water shut-off. And we're doing this, Mr. Mayor, we're doing it to City Council, we're doing this, leaders, because this is out of a deep religious conviction to take care of the least of these. And this is what King was expressing in the war in Vietnam, basically connecting his opposition to the war to his own religious conviction.
Well, sadly, there are very few people today in the ministry who speak like King, who act like King, who do the work that King has asked us to do. And frankly, it's one of those things where if you are, in particular I address Christian ministers, if you are a Christian minister, then the good news was meant for the poor, the dispossessed. It was for those who could not look after themselves and needed encouragement and people to look after them. And I know there are those who would say, well, the poor will always be with us. But let's not make it even more so by not addressing the poor that are with us right now in this city, in this instant. So I would agree with Dr. Foster and his D grade, but I believe we can do better, and we have to do better. We can't make it about building churches rather than building the people who would inhabit those churches.
Family, those individuals who we're talking about, the 17,000 families, or it could be 80% of African Americans or those who are brown, who are underclass and in poverty. They are considered invisible people to many folks. Not just the ministers, not just pastors, not just priests. They are considered invisible because we're talking about class. We're not just talking about race in America.
Yeah, poverty renders you invisible.
Absolutely. And so those folks, until they have a voice or someone provides them a voice, or they take on a image and become real to some people. Not until then will we see. And then there's the argument, as you already know this, because we know most of these pastors. They would say we're doing our piece in our community, in our church, and on our block. And it's a struggle in itself to take care of those who are in our flock. And so the argument would be, well, we're doing all that we can.
313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 is the number to call and chime in this conversation. You're listening to Red Line here on 910 AM and Banco Times. Let's take a listen again to Dr. King here. The war in Vietnam. This is one of the most important speeches that Dr. King.
For almost 3 continuous decades now, I think of them too because it is clear to me that there will be no meaningful solution until some attempt is made to know these people and hear their broken cries. Now let me tell you the truth about it. They must see Americans as strange liberators. You realize that the Vietnamese people proclaimed their own independence in 1945 after a combined French and Japanese occupation. And incidentally, this was before the Communist Revolution in China. They were led by Ho Chi Minh. This is a little known fact. These people declared themselves independent in 1945. They quoted our Declaration of Independence in their document of freedom. And yet our government refused to recognize. President Truman said they were not ready for independence. So we fell victim as a nation at that time of the same deadly arrogance that has poisoned the international situation for all of these years. France then set out to reconquer its former colony. And they fought 8 long, hard, brutal years trying to reconquer
Dr.
Vietnam.
King, really delving in international relations here, explaining the relationship between the United States foreign policy to Vietnam, and the fact that, you know, their own document of freedom really, in many ways, mirrors the Declaration of Independence. And I think in every chapter of American history, Lavonia and Bill, there are so many contradictions. The Declaration of Independence here says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, you know, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. On the other hand, the Supreme Court says a black person is worth this amount. You know, so there are many contradictions here. But the thing that's interesting in King's analysis is that seeing American soldiers as strange liberators. You come into liberators, but at home, there are millions of blacks who are waiting for liberation.
Right.
I mean, it's a massive contradiction.
Massive. And the thing about it, they saw the Vietnam War and the individuals there
Right.
as boogeymen.
Right.
I mean, there's all of a sudden there, and no one even probably could pronounce it until they put it on the front page. But they sold it. These are communists. They're going to come. They're going to take your guns. They're going to take your children. They're going to do
Yeah.
whatever. But here in America, and when I use the word now, guys, contradictions
Right.
were live and well, because those same young men who came home, as we know now, this is a fact, came home, they were struggling with drugs.
Right.
They were addicted to all kinds of things that we had never heard
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
Then they also couldn't provide, the government did not provide them services or support
Oh, yeah.
or housing or education. And remember, still at that time, there were people who did not look like us who got the deferments, who got the scholarships, who got the real estate underwriting,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
black people
yeah.
and black men would come home who saw.
Well, they went back to deep, debilitating public housing.
They couldn't even get a job at this, and they were once again. The New York Times said it. They were from the same block, the same school,
Yeah.
and they grew up at the same time, and they could not even get a job, and they had fought this
Right.
war.
Bill.
Yeah, I want to get back to the point of strange liberators, American soldiers being viewed as strange liberators, and look at it in the context of the Vietnamese people relative to American soldiers in Vietnam. It was reputed at one time that a village was burned down and destroyed, and the unit commander said we had to destroy the village in order to save it. Now, how does that look to someone in Vietnam? You just burned down my village in order to save me? How is that going to save me?
But just remember the picture that we saw. I know this is radio, but there was a picture of a child. There's running down the street in that village, running from that village that had been burned, and that child was burned.
Right.
That was
Yeah.
visually on the front page and
Right.
the cover of Time
That was a
magazine.
slightly different incident, but she was fleeing from a napalm
Yeah.
attack that had come from Air Force jets. The point is that how can you say, I'm here to liberate you, but I destroy the society that supports you? And so that's one contradiction. But I also want to look at a similarity that's in that segment of the speech, and that is when we talk about President Truman saying you're not ready for independence.
Who determines who is relevant?
That's well, but it's an interesting thing because it's reminiscent of the go slow that African Americans had heard for so long. You're not ready yet.
But it's also reminiscent of the arrogance that have always
That's true.
accompanied for American foreign policy. The arrogance that have always accompanied, decisions that are made in terms of the government saying, no, we decide you're not ready yet for this, but wait a minute, but other folks of a different color are ready, but you're not ready yet.
Well, there's arrogance
Right.
throughout
I mean-
American government. It's not just in foreign policy. We see that right here in Detroit in terms of we, the political leader, know what's better for you, the
Right.
citizens of Detroit, than you do.
Yeah.
We know that, for example, we're going to take it very light, that we can put a trolley in the middle of the block versus, taking care of the community or the neighborhood
Right.
or providing, services and safety for you. But you really need a trolley
Yeah.
down Woodward Avenue.
Yeah, I mean we've seen an emergency manager be put into place over Detroit, over Flint, over Kalamazoo, and only yesterday was it announced that the emergency management or the
And Flint.
supervision of Flint would
Yeah.
end. It's like, wait a minute, you knew better what was good for us? You have
Yeah.
killed us in this city, and now you're going to say, here, take it back.
Right. And
Let's-
in terms
let's-
That's arrogance.
Let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to John. John has a question or comment.
Yeah. Regulate, thank you for taking my call. If you don't do nothing else, I'd like for you to get that Birmingham little jail and send it to all the city councilors and Duggan down there because they definitely need to hear and need to read it and stuff.
Well, John, let me put it back to you. I cannot do that. I can't directly advocate like that. What I can do is provide a platform like I do. I can write columns and so forth, but you can take direct action. You can send them a copy of the letter from Birmingham jail, but I cannot do that.
Oh, okay, I'll do it. I go to Lafayette and get it, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
you
okay,
can
then.
do that. So you can go on Google. University of Pennsylvania has, the Stanford University has a lot of the King papers. Martin Luther King, Morehouse College has the Morehouse and the King collection, so you can definitely do that. Thank you so much, John. Let's go to Rick. Rick has a question or comment.
Yes, I was just going to agree and add with what you said already and just kind of contrast the idea so that we don't look for the leader of yesterday today because, as you know, our communication behaviors now are driving policy changes that, handle what we believe a lot differently. The internet and of information